Hey guys, tonight we drift back through time to a Rome that smells faintly of baked bread, damp stone, and yesterday's smoke. A city already awake before the sun fully clears the hills. You open your eyes in the half-light of early morning, listening to the layered sounds of ancient Rome beginning its daily stretch. Sandals slapping on stone, a donkey complaining loudly about existence, someone 2 doors down already arguing about money.
This is not the Rome of marble postcards and heroic statues. This is your Rome, crowded, practical, and just a little bit tired. And before we go any further, a gentle reality check. You probably won't survive this, at least not comfortably, because ancient Rome is many things, but convenient is not one of them.
So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, feel free to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie on a simple bed, wooden frame, woven straps, a thin mattress stuffed with straw or wool that has definitely seen better decades. Romans don't really do sleeping in the modern sense. They more or less pause consciousness for a few hours and hope for the best. You shift carefully because beds creak, and thin apartment walls mean everyone knows your business. If you're living in an insula, one of Rome's infamous apartment buildings, you're several stories up, closer to fire hazards and collapsing beams than you'd prefer. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into your morning. These insulae house most of Rome's population, packed tight, built fast, and regulated poorly, despite laws that technically limit their height. Technically. Rome is very good at technically. You sit up and immediately feel the cool air of the room. Glass windows are rare, so shutters do most of the work, and even those are a luxury. Somewhere outside, a water carrier shouts his availability, because while Rome boasts incredible aqueducts, not every building has direct access. You splash your face from a small basin, the water already slightly metallic in taste. Teeth? You do your best. Romans often use abrasive powders or chewed sticks. And yes, historians still argue whether urine-based cleaning solutions were actually common for dental care, or mostly a misunderstood joke that got out of hand. Either way, you swish, spit, and decide you're good enough for public life. Clothing comes next. You wrap yourself in a tunic, probably wool, belted at the waist. If you're a citizen, this is your uniform of daily existence. Togas are for formal occasions and political theater, not for climbing stairs or dodging street mud. There's a joke here that Romans dress like they're always one unexpected meeting away from being overdressed or underdressed at the same time, and honestly, that's not far off. You slide your feet into sandals already shaped by years of wear, and stand carefully, because stepping on something unpleasant indoors is an ancient Roman rite of passage no one advertises. As you step outside, the city greets you immediately, without asking how you slept. Streets are narrow, paved with uneven stones, polished smooth by centuries of traffic. You smell bread baking nearby, a comforting scent that promises breakfast if you have the coins. You also smell other things: animal waste, old fish, damp garbage, because Rome's sanitation system, while impressive for its time, is still very much a work in progress. Quirky tidbit time. Many Romans relied on communal public latrines, long benches with holes, no privacy, and a shared sponge on a stick for cleaning. You haven't even had breakfast yet, and already you're nostalgic for the future. The sun creeps higher, casting a pale gold over rooftops and temples. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint echo of a horn, signaling the start of official business. The Republic is technically still functioning. Magistrates exist, laws are passed, elections happen. But even in these quiet morning moments,
You can feel a subtle tension in the air, like a low hum beneath everything else.
Historians still argue whether ordinary citizens like you truly sensed the Republic's instability day to day, or whether it only becomes obvious in hindsight, neatly labeled in textbooks. From your perspective, it just feels like politics has become louder, messier, and harder to ignore. You walk carefully, sharing the street with carts, animals, and people from every corner of the Mediterranean. Rome is a magnet. Greeks, Gauls, Syrians, Egyptians, all here, all bringing their accents, gods, and cooking smells. This diversity is one of Rome's strengths and one of its quiet stress fractures. You overhear snippets of conversation, complaints about grain prices, jokes about corrupt officials, someone loudly praising a general whose name you've heard far too often lately. Another mainstream fact slides in gently. The late Republic is marked by massive wealth inequality, with elite families growing richer while many citizens scrape by. You don't need a census to know this. You see it every morning. You pause near a shrine at a street corner. A small offering, maybe a pinch of grain, maybe just a nod, is enough to acknowledge the household gods. Religion in Rome is practical, transactional. You honor the gods, they hopefully don't ruin your day. It's less about belief and more about habit. And yet, there's comfort in routine. Even as politics grow unstable, the rituals remain steady. There's a light joke to be made that Roman gods are basically ancient customer service reps. Keep them satisfied, don't make a fuss, and maybe they won't escalate your complaint to Jupiter. As you continue walking, you notice election notices painted on walls, urging support for this candidate or that one. They're bright, confident, and already slightly smudged. Campaigning never really stops in Rome. It just changes volume. You file the names away without much enthusiasm. You're more focused on surviving the day than saving the Republic. And honestly, most people feel the same. The fall of a political system rarely announces itself with trumpets. It seeps in quietly, between errands and meals. By the time you reach your destination, whether it's work, a patron's home, or the market, the city is fully awake. The noise settles into a constant background roar, oddly soothing once you stop fighting it. This is your normal. You don't know you're living in the last decades of the Roman Republic. You just know that Rome feels heavier lately, more crowded with ambition, more impatient with tradition. But for now, the sun is up, your day has begun, and history is happening softly, one ordinary morning at a time. You move through the morning with the practiced awareness that nothing in your life exists in isolation, not even inside your own home. Family, in Rome, is not just affection or obligation, it is structure, reputation, and survival folded into one. You step back inside your dwelling briefly, because Roman homes are busy places at dawn, and everyone seems to need something at once. If you live in an insula, privacy is more of a concept than a reality. Voices drift through thin walls like gossip with legs, and you know far more about your neighbors than you ever intended. Your household, however small, follows patterns older than anyone can remember. The paterfamilias, whether that's you or someone above you, technically holds legal authority over everyone beneath his roof. This is a mainstream historical fact that still sounds dramatic, even by Roman standards. The paterfamilias has power over property, finances, marriages, and, in theory, life and death. In practice, that power is softened by custom, public opinion, and the inconvenience of actually enforcing it. Rome loves extreme laws it rarely uses, like an ancient version of just in case. You exchange morning words with family members, brief and efficient. Affection exists, but it's rarely displayed the way modern people expect. Love is shown through responsibility, provision, and not embarrassing the family name in public. Children learn early that they are extensions of the household's reputation. They trail behind adults, absorbing rules, gossip, and expectations like sponges. Education, if available, is practical. Reading, writing, counting, rhetoric for those who can afford it. If not, learning happens by watching and doing,
which is how most Romans pick up their life skills anyway.
Status hums beneath every interaction. You can feel it without anyone mentioning it outright. Are you a citizen? A freedman? Freeborn but poor? Each category comes with invisible boundaries. A quirky tidbit slips in here. Freedmen, formerly enslaved people who have gained freedom, often become some of the most ambitious and financially successful Romans, partly because they know exactly what they're trying to escape. They owe loyalty to former masters, yes, but they also hustle with a determination that makes old aristocrats quietly uncomfortable.
Patronage shapes your day before you even leave the house. If you are a client, you are expected to show respect and support to your patron, often through morning visits called the salutationio. You put on your most respectable version of yourself and head out early, because punctuality matters when hierarchy is involved. Patrons provide protection, legal help, and sometimes food or money. In return, you offer loyalty, votes, and public praise. Historians still argue whether this system functioned more as mutual aid or social control, but standing there in line with others, you mostly think about whether there will be leftovers. The line outside a patron's home moves slowly. You shift your weight, listening to others murmur about politics, prices, and whose cousin is marrying whom. Everyone is networking, even if they don't call it that. A light joke floats through your mind. Rome may not have business cards, but it has an impressive memory for favors owed and returned. You bow, exchange greetings, accept a small token, or simply the acknowledgement of being seen. Being seen matters. In Rome, invisibility is its own kind of danger. Back at home later, domestic labor fills the gaps between public obligations. Cooking is simple, but time-consuming. Grain is ground, bread is baked, porridge simmers. Olive oil appears in nearly everything, because olive oil is life. If your household includes enslaved people, they handle much of this work. Their presence is so normalized that Rome barely notices itself relying on them. This is another mainstream fact that quietly defines your world. Slavery is woven into the economy, the household, and the imagination of Roman society. And yet historians still argue whether most Romans ever questioned this system in moral terms, or whether it was simply accepted as the way things were. You notice the quiet hierarchy, even within your own walls. Who eats first? Who eats what? Who speaks freely? All subtle signals of rank. Women manage households with skill and authority, even if the law rarely acknowledges it. They organize finances, arrange marriages, and maintain social ties that keep families afloat. Rome publicly downplays their power, while privately depending on it, a contradiction so consistent it almost feels intentional. Children run through the space, practicing with small toys, wooden swords, or dolls. They are both cherished and prepared early for loss, because childhood mortality is a fact no one can ignore. You don't dwell on it. Romans rarely do. You focus on what's in front of you. Another gentle joke drifts by. As the day unfolds, expectations press quietly against you. You are expected to honor your family, respect your patrons, maintain appearances, and not cause trouble that ripples upward. Even clothing choices signal your place. A cleaner tunic, a neater belt. Small things, but noticed. Reputation travels faster than news, and once damaged, it's nearly impossible to repair. Outside, the city continues its endless motion. Inside, family life anchors you, for better or worse. You may feel affection, obligation, or quiet resentment, sometimes all at once. But this structure gives you identity in a city of over 1 million souls. As the Republic strains under ambition and inequality, these small, daily relationships hold everything together. For now, you move within them without question, unaware that even these ancient patterns are slowly, almost invisibly, beginning to shift. You step back into the street with a small pouch of coins and a mental list that's already longer than you like. Breakfast isn't ceremonial in Rome, it's functional. You eat to keep moving, not to linger. Still, food shapes your mood more than any speech in the forum ever could. As you walk toward the market,
The city feels sharper now. Louder voices, brighter light, more elbows. Rome doesn't wake gently. It snaps awake, like it has places to be.
The marketplace is already alive, a patchwork of stalls, baskets, and shouted prices. Grain merchants dominate the scene, because grain dominates life. This is a mainstream historical fact that even children understand. Rome runs on grain, especially imported grain from places like Sicily, North Africa, and Egypt. When the grain supply wobbles, everything else trembles. You eye the prices carefully. They seem higher than last month. Again. You feel it in your chest before you do the math. You hand over a few coins for bread, flat, round loaves stamped with the baker's mark. Bakers work through the night so the city can eat by morning, and you silently thank them while wondering how long they can keep doing this without charging even more. Inflation is a word you don't have, but the feeling is familiar. Coins feel lighter in your hand than they used to. The denarius still looks the same, stamped with familiar faces, but it doesn't stretch as far. Historians still argue whether late Republican inflation was driven more by military spending, disrupted trade, or simple population pressure. But from your point of view, it just means fewer olives. You move on to buy a handful of olives, maybe some cheese if the price isn't insulting. You haggle lightly, because that's expected. Not haggling would be rude, like refusing a handshake. A fishmonger nearby shouts about the freshness of his catch, which is optimistic at best. You wrinkle your nose and keep walking. Fish sauce, garum, is everywhere in Rome, and while it's beloved, the smell is something you endure rather than enjoy. A light joke floats through your mind. If Rome ever collapses, archaeologists will still smell it coming. Money passes constantly from hand to hand. You notice the wear on coins, some nearly smooth from use. Quirky tidbit time. Romans occasionally clip or shave coins to steal tiny amounts of precious metal, a practice officially illegal and unofficially common. Everyone complains about dishonest money while quietly checking their own stash for the least worn pieces. Trust is always partial here, especially when it comes to currency. As you navigate the crowd, you overhear complaints about the grain dole. The state distributes free or subsidized grain to eligible citizens, a policy designed to keep the urban population fed and calm. It works, mostly, but enrollment lists, corruption, and shortages create constant tension. Someone mutters that a certain politician promises to fix it if elected. Someone else laughs. Promises are Rome's most abundant resource. You pause at a stall selling fruit. Figs, apples, maybe some dried dates. These are small luxuries, but they soften the day. You think about how much of Rome's food depends on long-distance trade, ships crossing unpredictable seas. A storm in the Mediterranean can ripple all the way into your breakfast. It's strange, feeling connected to places you've never seen through something as ordinary as bread. The market isn't just about food, it's information central. News travels mouth to mouth, exaggerated with each retelling. You hear about a new tax, a speech that went poorly, a general returning with his troops. Soldiers are expensive, and everyone knows it. Another mainstream fact slips in. Roman armies are increasingly loyal to their generals rather than the state, partly because those generals pay them, feed them, and promise land. You don't analyze this politically. You just notice that military victories seem to cost more at home than they used to. You stop to listen to a street performer reciting verses, hoping for a few coins. Art survives here, wedged between commerce and chaos. Nearby, a money changer sits behind a small table, stacks of coins arranged carefully. You consider exchanging some older coins, but hesitate. Fees add up. Everything adds up. As you leave the market, your basket lighter and your pouch noticeably thinner, you feel a quiet calculation settle in your mind. What can wait? What can't? Romans are excellent at mental accounting, constantly balancing need, pride, and risk. You remind yourself that tomorrow's market might be worse, or better. There's no way to know. and that uncertainty hums beneath daily life.
Walking back through the streets, you pass posters announcing upcoming games and festivals. Bread and circuses aren't just entertainment, they're pressure valves. The state knows distraction is cheaper than reform. Historians still argue whether these public pleasures genuinely satisfied the population or merely delayed unrest. But for now, they give people something to talk about besides prices. You bite into your bread as you walk, crumbs falling onto the stones. It's warm, simple, sustaining. Despite everything, it does its job. For a moment, the noise fades into background rhythm. This is Rome, abundance and anxiety sharing the same table. You don't know how long the balance will hold. You just know that today you ate, and tomorrow you'll try again.
You move from the market toward whatever work claims you today, the rhythm of Rome settling into your shoulders like a familiar weight. Work in the late Republic isn't one thing, it's 1,000 small motions repeated endlessly by millions of people. You might be a craftsman, a clerk, a porter, a shop assistant, or someone who does a little of everything and calls it a living. Very few Romans get to define themselves by a single job. You do what's available, what pays, and what doesn't anger anyone important.
If you're skilled with your hands, you join others in workshops that spill into the street. The clatter of tools becomes part of the city's soundtrack. Hammers on bronze, chisels on stone, looms clicking steadily like patient insects. Apprentices hover nearby, learning mostly by watching and being yelled at. This is a mainstream historical fact. Roman trades are organized loosely through collegia, associations that offer social support, burial funds, and a sense of identity. They're not quite guilds in the medieval sense, but they matter. Belonging to one can mean the difference between dignity and desperation. If your work is less tangible, copying documents, tallying accounts, carrying messages, you spend much of your day standing, waiting, listening. Idle time is rarely empty. Gossip fills the gaps. You hear who's in favor, who's fallen out, whose nephew just got a cushy posting. Information is currency here, sometimes worth more than actual coins. A light joke drifts through your mind. Rome doesn't have social media, but it absolutely has opinions, and no one keeps them to themselves.
You notice how conversations bend around power. People lower their voices when mentioning certain names, raise them when complaining about safe targets. Senators are mocked openly. Generals are handled more carefully. Everyone seems to have a theory about where the Republic is headed, though few agree. Historians still argue whether political polarization in this era felt as sharp to contemporaries as it appears now, but standing among your co-workers, you can feel the edges. It's not shouting yet, it's murmuring.
Midday approaches and the heat settles in. Rome smells stronger as the sun climbs. Sweat, oil, animals, cooking food. You pause to drink water, maybe watered-down wine if you can afford it. Pure water isn't always trusted, which is ironic given the aqueducts arching proudly overhead. Another quirky tidbit slips in. Romans often add lead-based sweeteners to wine, a practice that tastes pleasant and may or may not contribute to long-term health problems. You take a sip and decide not to think about it too hard. Future consequences are rarely today's priority. You watch people pass, senators in spotless togas surrounded by clients, messengers running with tablets tucked under their arms, enslaved people carrying loads heavier than they are. The city runs on their labor, visible everywhere and acknowledged nowhere. You catch snippets of laughter, arguments, deals being struck. Work and life blur together until they're almost the same thing.
At some point, someone brings up the army. They always do. A coworker mentions a cousin who enlisted and hasn't written back. Another boasts about serving years ago under a famous commander. Military service is a path to advancement, land and honor, or injury and disappointment. The Republic relies on citizen soldiers in theory, but in practice, long campaigns pull men away from trades and families for years. This tension seeps into daily work life. Fields go on tilt. Shops close. The city absorbs the consequences quietly.
You break briefly for a simple meal, eaten standing or sitting wherever there's shade. Bread again, maybe cheese, maybe fruit if you planned well. You talk while you eat, because silence feels suspicious. Someone cracks a joke about politicians promising jobs while doing very little work themselves. It lands well. Humor is one of Rome's favorite pressure releases. As the afternoon drags on, fatigue sets in. Work doesn't stop so much as it thins, conversations growing slower, movements less precise. You notice how people stretch tasks to fill time, how efficiency isn't always rewarded. Tomorrow will bring the same demands, so there's no need to rush. Rome has existed for centuries. It can wait another hour. By late afternoon, the city begins its subtle shift toward evening. Shops start to close. Tools are put away. Accounts roughly balanced. You feel that particular tiredness that isn't exhaustion, but accumulation. The weight of noise, decisions, and other people's expectations. Yet there's comfort in routine. Work anchors you in a city that often feels too large to grasp. As you step away, gossip lingers in your ears, unfinished and unresolved. Rome doesn't offer conclusions easily. You head onward, carrying the day's labor with you, unaware that these ordinary hours, filled with work, rumors, and small jokes, are the quiet scaffolding holding up a republic already leaning under its own weight. You drift toward the Forum almost without thinking, the way Romans do when they want to feel connected to the pulse of the city without committing to anything in particular. The Forum is never silent. Even from a distance, you hear it, a layered murmur of voices, footsteps, arguments, laughter, and the occasional sharp echo of a speaker projecting confidence, whether he feels it or not. Marble buildings frame the space like attentive listeners, their columns catching the light and throwing it back in soft, pale reflections. As you step onto the worn stones, the air feels different here, charged, restless. This is where Rome talks to itself. Laws are debated, deals are whispered, reputations are made, and quietly dismantled. A mainstream historical fact settles gently into your awareness. The Roman Forum functions as the political, legal, and social heart of the Republic, a place where public life is meant to be visible, participatory, and shared. In practice, it's crowded, chaotic, and dominated by those who know how to command attention. You slow your pace, letting the crowd carry you. Advocates rehearse arguments near basilicas, their voices rising and falling in practiced rhythm. Litigants hover anxiously, clutching tablets, hoping today will bring resolution. Spoiler, it probably won't. Roman legal proceedings are famously drawn out, tangled in tradition and personality. Historians still argue whether this complexity protected citizens from arbitrary power or simply favored those with time, money, and patience. Standing here, you suspect it's a bit of both. A speaker mounts the rostra, the raised platform adorned with the prows of captured enemy ships. He begins with confidence, gesturing broadly, invoking tradition, ancestors, and the will of the people. You listen for a moment, then notice how many others don't. Some are chatting, some are bargaining, some are just enjoying the shade. Political participation in Rome doesn't always look like rapt attention. It looks like multitasking. You catch fragments of rhetoric, warnings about moral decline, promises of reform, accusations of corruption. None of it is new. The names change. The complaints stay the same. A light joke slips into your thoughts. If speeches alone could fix Rome, the Republic would be immortal. Instead, words pile up like dust, settling into corners and waiting to be swept aside by the next crisis. You wander past statues of long-dead statesmen, their stone faces frozen in eternal seriousness. They watch everything and comment on nothing. Somewhere nearby, a group of young men practice oratory, mimicking famous speeches with exaggerated drama. Education in rhetoric is prized here, The ability to persuade is often more valuable than the truth itself. Quirky tidbit time. Roman students sometimes practiced by arguing deliberately absurd positions, training their minds to defend anything convincingly. You hear a snippet and shake your head, wondering if that habit ever really fades. Vendors weave through the crowd selling snacks, scrolls, amulets, and cheap trinkets. The forum is supposed to be dignified, but commerce sneaks in wherever there's foot traffic. You buy a small cup of watered wine and sip slowly, watching the flow of people. Senators glide past in their togas edged with purple, clients trailing behind like punctuation marks. Power announces itself here through clothing, posture, and who stops to listen when someone speaks. You notice soldiers standing off to one side, not officially present, but not exactly absent either. Veterans are common sights in the city now, their presence a reminder that Rome's strength comes from force as much as law. Another mainstream fact threads quietly into the moment. During the late Republic, the boundary between military and civilian life grows increasingly thin, especially as generals gain political influence. You don't dwell on it, but you feel it. A subtle shift in who truly commands loyalty. Nearby, a heated argument breaks out over a proposed law. Voices rise, hands gesture sharply, and for a moment it feels like things might tip into violence. Then it diffuses, laughter breaking the tension. This happens often. Rome flirts with chaos, but usually pulls back at the last second. Historians still argue whether this pattern represents resilience or denial. From where you stand, it just feels exhausting. As the sun begins its slow descent, the forum's energy changes. The urgency softens, conversations stretch, and people linger without purpose. You find a spot to sit on a low step, letting the stone cool beneath you. You think about how many decisions affecting millions are debated here, often influenced by mood, pride, and personal grudges. And yet, life goes on. Bread is baked, children grow, work resumes tomorrow. Eventually, you stand and drift away, the murmur of the forum fading behind you. It will continue without you, as it always does. For now, you carry its noise with you, like an echo in your chest, a reminder that the Republic is loud, alive, and quietly fraying at the edges. You don't have to go far to feel the pull of an election season in Rome. It presses itself into daily life with chalked slogans on walls, handshakes that last a second too long, and smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. Even if you try to ignore politics, politics does not return the favor. As you walk, you notice fresh notices painted overnight. Names, offices sought, promises condensed into a few confident words. They'll be scrubbed away eventually, replaced by the next hopeful voice. Elections in the Republic are oddly theatrical. Candidates don't campaign with speeches alone, they campaign with presence. A mainstream historical fact slips in easily here. Roman politicians rely heavily on personal visibility, greeting voters in public spaces, attending events, and reminding everyone of their lineage. You recognize a candidate not by policy, but by the number of people orbiting him, like small moons. His toga is spotless, his handshake practiced, his laugh just loud enough to be remembered. You pause as one such man approaches, flanked by supporters. He calls you by name, or at least convincingly pretends to. This alone is meant to impress. He asks about your family, your work, your health. You answer politely, aware that this exchange is less about you and more about the performance of concern. Still, there's a strange comfort in being acknowledged. In a city this large, attention feels like value. Coins change hands subtly. Officially, bribery is illegal. Unofficially, it's practically expected. Quirky tidbit time. Candidates distribute sportula, small gifts of food or money, framed as generosity rather than outright bribes. The distinction is thin, and everyone knows it. You accept what's offered with a neutral expression, mentally noting the name attached to it. Loyalty is flexible when survival is involved. Nearby, someone scoffs loudly, accusing all politicians of being the same. Another person fires back that at least this one fixes roads. The argument fizzles out without resolution. Most do. Historians still argue whether Roman voters believed elections could genuinely bring change, or whether they participated out of habit and social pressure. Standing here, you suspect many feel both hopeful and cynical at once. The comitia, the official voting assemblies, loom in your mind even if you're not there today. Voting in Rome isn't secret or simple. It's public, physical, and time-consuming. You stand in line, cast a tablet, and hope your voice isn't swallowed by those with more wealth and influence. The system technically values citizen participation, but it's weighted in favor of the elite. This imbalance isn't hidden, it's baked in. As the day continues, promises pile up. Grain reform, debt relief, restoration of moral values, strong leadership. Each candidate frames themselves as the solution to problems that feel increasingly large and abstract. You hear familiar names mentioned with reverence or suspicion, men who command armies, not just votes. Another mainstream fact hums beneath the surface. By this point in the Republic, political success is deeply intertwined with military achievement. Victory abroad buys influence at home. You overhear someone whisper about how much a certain office costs to obtain. Campaign expenses are enormous, and debt is common among the political class. This creates a cycle that's both impressive and alarming. Spend heavily to win office, then recoup losses through influence and favors. It's not discussed openly, but it's understood. A light joke crosses your mind. Rome's politicians treat debt like a temporary inconvenience, assuming power will eventually sort it out. As evening approaches, campaign activity intensifies briefly before fading. Candidates host dinners, appear at gatherings, and make the rounds one last time. You attend one such event out of obligation, standing with others as speeches flow and wine loosens tongues. The atmosphere is almost festive. Politics here is social, not just ideological. You laugh when expected, nod when appropriate, and leave before things get too loud. Walking home, you pass more slogans scrawled on walls, some praising, some mocking. Someone has added a crude drawing beneath a candidate's name. Public opinion is not subtle. You smile faintly. Even in a system dominated by elites, humor finds a way to punch upward. As night settles in, the noise softens. The election will come and go, and life will continue much as it did before. Or so it feels. You don't sense that these rituals are losing their power, slowly hollowed out by ambition and force. For now, they still matter enough to perform. And so you perform too. One handshake, one vote, one quiet compromise at a time. You notice the soldiers before you hear them. There's a particular sound to military movement that cuts through Rome's usual noise, a heavier rhythm of boots, metal shifting, voices trained to carry without shouting. As you stand near a crossroads, a small group of men passes by, dust clinging to their cloaks, faces weathered by sun and long roads. They don't look like the idealized statues in the Forum. They look tired, alert, and quietly confident in a way that makes people step aside without being asked. Soldiers passing through the city have become more common lately. Officially, armies are not supposed to enter Rome itself, a long-standing Republican rule meant to protect civilian life from military force. This is a mainstream historical fact you've absorbed without ever reading it anywhere. No general may legally bring troops across the sacred boundary of the city, the Pomerium. And yet, veterans are everywhere, and armed men linger just outside, close enough to remind everyone where real power often sits. You watch people react. Some straighten their posture. Some smile a little too eagerly. Some look away. Soldiers attract attention the way storms do, part curiosity, part unease. A child points excitedly, only to be gently pulled back by a parent. Glory is admired from a distance, so is danger. As the men pause near a fountain, you overhear fragments of conversation. They talk about land grants promised but delayed, about commanders who remembered their names, about others who didn't. This is where loyalty lives now, not in abstract devotion to the Republic, but in personal bonds forged through shared hardship. Historians still argue whether this shift was inevitable given Rome's expansion, or whether different political choices could have preserved the old system. From where you stand, the answer feels less important than the result. One veteran laughs loudly, recounting a moment from a campaign far away. Others chuckle, shaking their heads. There's a dark humor here, born of experience you don't share. A light joke floats through your own mind. Soldiers always seem to remember the boring parts of war most vividly, the waiting, the marching, the hunger, while everyone else imagines endless heroics. Reality, as usual, is less cinematic. You think about how military service used to fit neatly into Roman life. Citizens serving temporarily, returning to farms and trades. Now, campaigns stretch on for years, pulling men permanently away from old routines. Farms fall into debt. Families adjust. Rome grows richer and poorer at the same time. Another mainstream fact hums quietly. The professionalization of the army during the late Republic fundamentally alters Roman society, banding soldiers to generals who promise pay and land instead of to distant institutions. As the soldiers move on, their presence lingers. You hear whispers trail behind them. Someone mutters admiration. Someone else mutters fear. Both feel justified. You resume walking, but your thoughts stick with them. These men have seen the edges of Rome's power, foreign lands, unfamiliar customs, the rewards and costs of conquest. They bring those experiences back into the city like invisible baggage. Later, you encounter another group, recruits this time, younger, less confident. Their gear looks newer, their movements less practiced. They cluster together, eyes wide, absorbing the city before it absorbs them. You feel a brief, unexpected sympathy. They're about to step into a machine that reshapes people, whether they want it to or not. Someone cracks a joke about how long before they miss Rome's bread. Laughter follows, a little forced. Quirky tidbit time. Soldiers often carry small personal charms, amulets, bits of home, tokens blessed by local gods. Official religion and personal superstition blend easily here. Mars may be the god of war, but a lucky pebble from your mother's doorstep feels more reliable. You spot a small charm hanging from a belt and wonder who gave it and whether it still brings comfort. As evening approaches, taverns fill with off-duty soldiers and civilians alike. Stories flow with the wine. You sit nearby, listening without intruding. Tales grow longer, details blur. Victories expand slightly with each retelling. This isn't deceit so much as tradition. Memory softens edges, rounds corners. Historians still argue how much of Rome's military legend is shaped by these informal narratives rather than official records. Sitting here, you suspect the answer is more than anyone admits. Eventually, the soldiers drift away, to lodgings, to camps outside the city, to destinations unknown. Rome exhales quietly once they're gone, returning to its usual rhythm. But something has shifted, just a fraction. You feel it in the way people speak a little more carefully, in how certain names are mentioned with a new respect. The Republic still stands, but its foundations feel heavier, reinforced not by laws alone, but by men who know how to march. By the time the afternoon heat begins to loosen its grip, your body knows where it wants to go. Toward water, toward warmth, toward a place where no one expects anything urgent from you. The baths call to you not with noise, but with promise. In Rome, bathing isn't just about cleanliness, it's about pause, about becoming part of a slow-moving current of people, all pretending, for a while, that politics and prices can wait. You approach the bath complex with the easy familiarity of habit. Even modest neighborhoods usually have access to some form of public baths, and larger ones feel almost like small cities within the city. This is a mainstream historical fact you don't question. Roman baths are social spaces, open to most citizens for a very small fee, subsidized, because a relaxed population is a manageable one. You pay your entry, hand over your clothes to be watched, hopefully, and step inside.
The air is immediately different. Warm, damp, heavy with the smell of oil and steam. Voices echo off stone walls, softened by humidity. You move first into the opotorium, the changing room, where people of all ages and statuses undress with practiced indifference. Modesty exists, but it's flexible here. You place your trust in the gods, the attendants, and the assumption that no one wants your sandals badly enough to steal them.
From there, you follow the familiar sequence: tepidarium, caldarium, frigidarium, each space easing your body into a different state. Heat seeps into your muscles, loosening the day's labor and tension. You feel your shoulders drop, your breathing slow. Someone nearby groans happily as they sink into the warmth, and you silently agree. A light joke drifts through your mind. Rome may be collapsing politically, but at least the baths are still excellent. Conversation flows as easily as water. You hear debates about elections, about generals, about whether the grain shipments will arrive on time. No one raises their voice much. Steam blurs sharp edges, both literal and social. Quirky tidbit time. Bathing Romans often clean themselves by scraping oil and dirt off their skin with a tool called a strigil, a curved piece of metal that looks faintly medieval and feels surprisingly effective. You borrow one, scrape carefully, and try not to think too hard about who used it before you. As you soak, you notice how boundaries soften here. A senator might sit near a shopkeeper, a veteran beside a clerk. Status doesn't disappear, but it relaxes. Historians still argue whether the baths genuinely promoted social cohesion or merely created the illusion of equality, but from inside the steam, the difference feels academic. For a moment, you're just bodies in warm water, equal in sweat. Eventually, you move into cooler water, the shock sharp but refreshing. It wakes you up just enough to appreciate being awake. Nearby, laughter erupts as someone misjudges the temperature and gasps dramatically. It's harmless, human, grounding. Rome isn't all speeches and armies. It's this, too. After bathing, you linger in adjacent spaces: exercise yards, shaded benches, small libraries, and larger complexes. Entertainment drifts in from nearby streets: music, dice games, someone practicing a speech they'll never give in public. You watch, you listen, you exist without obligation. This is leisure, Roman style, communal, noisy, and strangely calming. As evening deepens, you leave the baths cleaner, looser, lighter. Your hair is damp, your skin smells faintly of oil. Outside, the city feels different now, less sharp around the edges. You walk toward a tavern or eatery, drawn by the smell of cooked food. Dinner is simple: stew, bread, maybe wine diluted just enough to feel civilized. You sit among others doing the same, conversations overlapping without colliding. Entertainment continues around you. A storyteller recites familiar tales with new embellishments. Dice clatter on a table, groans and cheers rising and falling. Someone sings off-key, loudly confident. This is distraction, yes, but it's also connection. Another mainstream fact hums softly: public entertainment and leisure are deeply political in Rome, funded and encouraged by those who understand their calming effect. Bread and circuses isn't a criticism here, it's a strategy. You feel the day settling into you, its tensions smoothed by warmth and routine. Tomorrow will bring the same concerns: money, power, uncertainty. But tonight, you're allowed this pause. Historians still argue whether such distractions delayed necessary change or preserved stability longer than expected. Sitting here, you don't analyze. You simply breathe, sip, and let the noise lull you toward rest. Grateful for the simple luxury of forgetting, just for a while.
As night leans gently over the city, your thoughts drift toward the gods, not out of sudden devotion, but because religion in Rome is woven into everything, whether you notice it or not. You pass small shrines tucked into corners, flickering with oil lamps, their flames steady despite the evening breeze. Someone has left a handful of grain, another a wilted flower. You nod as you pass, a small acknowledgement that costs nothing, and might, just might, help.
Religion here isn't about belief the way later ages will frame it. It's about balance. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into place. Roman religion is primarily ritualistic, focused on maintaining the pax deorum, the peace with the gods. You do the right things, in the right order, at the right times, and the universe is supposed to cooperate. Faith is practical, almost contractual. You hold up your end, the gods hopefully hold up theirs. At home, or perhaps at a crossroads shrine, you pause for a simple ritual. A murmur of words, half remembered, passed down more by habit than instruction. You're not entirely sure which god handles which concern anymore. There are so many. Household gods, the lares and penates, watch over daily life, while larger deities oversee broader forces. Jupiter handles the big stuff. Vesta keeps the hearth steady. Mercury watches commerce and travelers, which feels relevant given how often money disappears. A light joke drifts through your mind. Rome's gods are specialists, and none of them cover unexpected political collapse. Omens are everywhere if you're inclined to notice them. A bird's flight, a stumble on the threshold, a strange dream. Someone mentions that the chickens refuse to eat before a recent assembly, which is apparently very bad. Quirky tidbit time. Sacred chickens are genuinely consulted for auspices, and their eating habits can delay or cancel official actions. You imagine explaining that to someone centuries from now and smile faintly. You don't mock these practices openly. Superstition and religion overlap comfortably here, and skepticism is kept quiet. Even powerful men hesitate to ignore unfavorable signs. Historians still argue whether Roman leaders truly believed in omens or used them as convenient tools to justify decisions already made. From your perspective, it hardly matters. The result is the same: uncertainty cloaked in ritual. You attend, or at least witness, a small public ceremony. Incense curls upward. Prayers are spoken clearly and carefully. Precision matters. A misstep in wording can invalidate the whole thing. The seriousness of it all contrasts sharply with the casual chaos of daily life. Here, order is performative, but comforting. The gods are listening, you hope, even if they're busy. As you walk away, you overhear philosophical talk spilling from a nearby doorway. A group debates fate, virtue, and whether the gods intervene at all. Stoics argue for acceptance, Epicureans for moderation and distance from divine meddling. You don't linger. Philosophy is interesting, but it rarely helps with rent. Still, these ideas float through the city, shaping how people cope with instability. You reflect on how religion ties the Republic together. Festivals mark time. Rituals legitimize power. Triumphs honor gods as much as generals. Another mainstream fact hums softly. Religious offices are deeply entwined with political ones, giving ambitious men spiritual authority alongside civic power. The line between sacred and secular is thin enough to step over accidentally. As you settle in for the night, you consider the small uncertainties ahead. Will the grain arrive? Will the elections calm things or stir them? Will the gods care? Historians still argue whether Rome's religious system adapted quickly enough to social change, or whether it became another rigid structure, straining under new pressures. Lying there, you don't frame it so grandly. You just hope tomorrow is manageable. You extinguish the lamp, darkness settling in layers. Outside, distant sounds of the city drift through. Laughter, footsteps, a late argument fading into nothing. You whisper one last, informal request to whichever god might be listening, then let sleep come. Faith here is quiet, habitual, and unresolved, much like the Republic itself.
You wake slowly the next morning, aware immediately of the lives swirling around you that exist without your permission or approval. Women bustle in the household, orchestrating movement and resources with quiet authority. Even if they lack formal legal power, they exercise influence in ways that ripple through every corner of Roman life. A mainstream historical fact settles gently. Women in the late Republic manage households, control budgets, and maintain critical social networks, all while being officially subordinate to the paterfamilias, or husband. You notice how their presence shapes the day, even when no one else bothers to acknowledge it.
Slaves move with practiced efficiency, anticipating needs before they're spoken aloud. You might not like depending on them, but it's hard to imagine life without their labor. Tasks you didn't even realize existed, heating water, sweeping floors, running errands, are quietly carried out, leaving you free to focus on your own obligations. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some enslaved people carried small charms or notes hidden in clothing for luck, love, or secret messages, tiny rebellions of personality against an otherwise controlling environment. You see a young slave tuck something quickly into a fold of their tunic and wonder what it might be. Children dart through corridors, their energy almost tangible. They speak freely with mothers and older siblings, with an unspoken awareness of boundaries. Boys are taught skills and rhetoric that might someday elevate them into public life. Girls are taught patience, household management, and social grace. Education is uneven, highly dependent on class and resources. Historians still argue whether girls ever truly had the opportunity to shape public life indirectly, or whether their influence was mostly confined to household management. Standing here, you notice they already wield a subtle form of power simply by moving through space with confidence. You witness women negotiating, instructing, and mediating with an ease that almost passes unnoticed. They broker marriages, oversee food distribution, and subtly pressure patrons and clients to act in the family's interest. These actions rarely enter the annals of history, yet they sustain Rome's daily operations as much as law and politics do. Another light joke surfaces in your mind. If historians wrote more about these efforts, textbooks would need entirely new chapters on invisible governance. Meanwhile, enslaved workers handle errands in the streets, carrying messages, fetching goods, or assisting artisans. Their labor keeps the Republic functioning, yet their personal agency is limited. You see the skill in their movements, the way they anticipate traffic, dodge obstacles, and complete tasks efficiently. Freedom is an abstract concept for most, but subtle cleverness and survival instinct are ever present. A mainstream fact slides into your awareness. Slavery in Rome is deeply integrated, affecting economy, social life, and politics. You feel it quietly around you, tangible, but often invisible. Some women are public performers or healers, navigating the city with relative independence. Their visibility contrasts sharply with the legal limitations they face. You hear about them in passing. Someone mentions a well-known midwife or singer, and wonder at the social negotiation required to thrive in such spaces. Quirky tidbit time, certain women famously influenced political outcomes through social gatherings, poetry, or whispered advice, wielding power indirectly in ways historians still debate openly. You notice the subtle hierarchy in the household. Who speaks first at meals, whose opinions are deferred to, and who maintains quiet authority. Even children learn these lessons intuitively. You recall seeing similar patterns in the forum, in markets, in baths. Life in Rome is a constant negotiation of status and respect, played out in mundane interactions just as much as in politics. As the day stretches, you venture outside and observe how women interact with markets and neighbors. They carry baskets, barter for essentials, and often exchange news, gossip, and advice simultaneously. Their networks extend beyond the household into the city's veins. You realize that the Republic, for all its laws and institutions, relies on these invisible threads almost as much as on senators or magistrates.
Historians still argue whether these informal systems strengthened Rome or merely preserved inequality, but in practice, they are indispensable. At night, the household settles into its routine again. You hear women giving final instructions, ensuring tasks are complete, and reminding children of the coming day's responsibilities. The energy is quiet, purposeful, and sustaining. Even if the city outside is loud with politics, work, and soldiers, the household maintains an inner rhythm that keeps its members alive and connected. You reflect on the balance between visibility and silence, power and subservience, authority and clever negotiation. Life in Rome is not egalitarian, yet influence often flows in unexpected ways. Women, slaves, and children all exercise it differently, shaping your day and the broader city without ever appearing in official records. You move through this complex web, participating and observing, aware that most people around you are doing the same. By the time evening falls, the household quiets. Meals are shared, chores completed, and tasks tucked away for tomorrow. You feel the subtle satisfaction of a day managed, not entirely by you, but with your attention and cooperation. Tomorrow itself, some will be hidden, and you will navigate both with quiet awareness. Rome continues, fragile and resilient, carried not only by law or ambition, but by the unnoticed labor and cleverness of those often left out of the history books. The next morning, you wake to a city already moving without pause. Rome never truly sleeps, and even the dim light of dawn finds merchants, laborers, and street performers carving space for themselves among the stone and dust. Today, your attention is drawn to trade, not just the local markets you know so well, but to the larger networks that keep the city alive. Rome depends on goods arriving from faraway lands, and their journey feels almost mythical as you follow the whispers of commerce through the streets. Grain still dominates the conversation, as it always does. You overhear talk of ships arriving from Africa, of silos being emptied and refilled. This is a mainstream historical fact. Rome's survival depends heavily on imported grain, particularly from Egypt, Sicily, and North Africa. Without it, hunger rises quickly, unrest simmers, and the delicate social balance threatens to snap. You adjust your pace, watching carts loaded with sacks, thinking about how easily a single storm or pirate raid could disrupt everything. The fragility of supply is a quiet but constant anxiety. Nearby, a group of merchants haggle over spices, fabrics, and pottery. The smells are intoxicating. Cinnamon, coriander, crushed herbs, the faint tang of sea brine clinging to imported goods. Quirky tidbit time. Romans sometimes prized garum so much that a single jar could cost more than a slave's daily wage, yet everyone from senator to shopkeeper seemed willing to pay for the culinary thrill. You breathe it in, thinking about how tastes and trade intersect in strange, powerful ways. Commerce isn't just about goods, it's about relationships. You watch merchants recognize one another across streets, exchanging nods and coded phrases that mean little to outsiders. Loyalty and reputation govern these interactions more than law ever could. Historians still argue whether Roman trade networks were surprisingly egalitarian or dominated almost entirely by elite intermediaries. But standing here, you notice subtle shifts, a small trader gaining ground, a familiar buyer favoring one vendor over another, negotiations subtly reinforcing hierarchy and opportunity at once. You follow a cart loaded with amphorae, noting the care with which they are handled. Each jar holds olive oil, wine, or fish sauce, precious commodities in a city that consumes them endlessly. Workers move with practiced skill, balancing the load on narrow streets, exchanging grunts and gestures. Efficiency here is less about speed and more about maintaining order and avoiding disaster. Spilled wine or broken oil could be a catastrophe for someone that aren't theirs to spare. The city's port connections hover in the background of your mind. Ships sail across the Mediterranean, bringing goods, ideas, and sometimes threats. Pirates and storms are real dangers. Trade requires vigilance, luck,
and often bribery to ensure safe passage. You wonder briefly whether anyone farther from the docks appreciates how closely every loaf, every cup, every stitch of cloth depends on these fragile connections. A conversation drifts your way about luxury goods. One trader boasts about a shipment of silk from the east, dazzling colors no one has seen before. Another mutters that the price is too high and waits for someone else to bite. Luxury items are rare, coveted, and often a tool for displaying wealth and status. A light joke passes through your mind. Rome may be collapsing under debt and ambition, but at least someone somewhere is enjoying ridiculous fabrics. Food delivery continues, quietly reinforcing social hierarchies. Wealthier households receive more frequent shipments, fresher items, and rarer spices, while ordinary citizens rely on local markets and the grain dole. This distribution of abundance shapes social interaction subtly yet powerfully. Historians still argue whether disparities in access contributed directly to political unrest, or if cultural norms smoothed over resentment. From your vantage point, you see both tension and accommodation in every transaction. You notice the role of moneylenders and bankers, quietly observing the flow of wealth. Credit underpins trade. Coins in hand are not always enough. Loans, promises, and delayed payments create webs of obligation. You overhear a whispered conversation about a debtor unable to pay on time. The lender nods politely, smiles, and records it carefully. Rome thrives on these silent agreements. Quirky tidbit time. Some bankers use tiny figurines or notes to mark debts, creating a tactile ledger that anyone familiar with the system could interpret. It seems almost like magic, yet it's essential to the city's economy. Even as the afternoon light softens, commerce does not slow significantly. Street vendors hawk goods alongside imported wares, shouting prices, sampling smells, and keeping the city in motion. You watch interactions with an almost detached attention, noting how habit, hierarchy, and opportunity combine in every exchange. Each deal reinforces relationships, status, and sometimes survival. As evening approaches, goods are stored, carts returned, accounts roughly balanced. The city exhales briefly, ready to begin the cycle again tomorrow. You pause, reflecting on how fragile yet resilient these networks are. Rome depends on human diligence, trust, and occasional luck. Any disruption, a storm, political unrest, theft, could ripple across the city, but somehow it endures. The city thrives in spite of risk, bolstered by practice, repetition, and subtle social codes that outsiders might never notice. By nightfall, the streets calm, and merchants lock up their stalls. You head home, carrying the echoes of commerce in your mind. Every loaf, every jar, every coin has passed through countless hands today, each touch shaping not only the city's economy, but the lives of those who inhabit it. Tomorrow, the process will start again, endless and necessary, a quiet pulse beneath the spectacle of politics and the thunder of armies. Evening settles over Rome, softening the city's sharp edges into a muted mosaic of shadows and amber light. You wander through narrow alleys toward a quieter part of the city, where the clamor of markets and politics diminishes and domestic life asserts itself. Here you can feel the pulse of ordinary Romans, families finishing their meals, neighbors exchanging greetings, lanterns flickering through windows, the scent of cooking fires lingering in the air. Life continues in its slow, deliberate rhythm, barely affected by generals and senators. As you move through these residential areas, the sounds of work and trade fade into quieter conversations and children's laughter. The daily grind of the market has passed, leaving behind empty streets punctuated by stray footsteps and occasional calls. You note the contrast. The same city that could feel overwhelmingly crowded and chaotic earlier in the day now seems calm and measured. A mainstream historical fact becomes evident. Urban life in Rome varies dramatically by time and place, with residential quarters providing a respite from commerce and civic activity.
It's here that social and familial structures quietly assert themselves.
You pause in front of a modest domus, noting the architectural cues that mark class and status. A small atrium, mosaics worn smooth from years of use, a shallow fountain murmuring in the courtyard. Interiors are designed to welcome light, air, and human interaction, balancing utility with social signaling. You step inside briefly, letting your gaze linger on practical touches: a hearth stacked with firewood, benches arranged for conversation, storage jars tucked neatly against walls. Even the simplest Roman homes convey both order and care.
Inside, women coordinate household life with remarkable efficiency. Tasks are distributed, schedules maintained, and priorities enforced with gentle authority. You see a mother checking on her children while instructing a servant to prepare dinner. Laundry, food preparation, and management of the household's small wealth occupy her attention simultaneously. Quirky tidbit time. Some Roman women would carry small tokens of fortune, tiny charms hidden in aprons or hair, to protect the family or encourage good luck. You spot one resting near a basin, a reminder of the subtle rituals woven into domestic life.
Children play quietly in corners, their games a mix of skill, imagination, and mimicry of adult behavior. Boys practice basic tools or rhetoric. Girls engage in socialized play that mirrors the household responsibilities they will one day assume. Historians still argue how much these early experiences shaped public or private influence later in life. But from your perspective, the lessons are already visible: adaptability, observation, negotiation, and subtlety. Meanwhile, enslaved people move with quiet efficiency, attending to household tasks and ensuring that daily life functions smoothly. You note their diligence, the way their work is integrated seamlessly into the household's rhythm, yet rarely celebrated. This is another mainstream fact of Roman life. Slavery is essential to both domestic and public operations, and it forms the backbone of urban society. You acknowledge their efforts silently, aware of how much of your own comfort depends on their labor. Outside the home, you notice neighbors interacting, exchanging small favors or news, maintaining the invisible social web that keeps communities cohesive. In quieter neighborhoods, gossip and small-scale negotiation are as important as official law or military presence. People alert each other to approaching authorities, merchants offering sales, or unusual events, reinforcing trust and vigilance in subtle ways. As darkness deepens, you move through the city, sensing the layers of activity winding down. Fires flicker in windows, smoke drifts into alleys, and the sounds of the day fade into distant laughter, murmured conversation, and the occasional dog bark. Rome feels both vast and intimate at once, the city's enormity softened by human scale and familiar routines. You pause to reflect on the intersections of power, labor, and routine that define daily life. Politics and military influence are undeniable, but much of the city's stability rests on these quieter, everyday practices: households managing resources, women coordinating complex tasks, children learning roles, and slaves executing their labor with care and skill. These layers, invisible to historians and politicians alike, sustain the Republic in ways more subtle than speeches or triumphs. Historians still argue whether these social structures were sufficient to prevent collapse or merely delayed it. For now, they maintain the fabric of daily existence. The night air carries the faint scent of baked bread, wood smoke, and distant animals. Lanterns glimmer, casting long, moving shadows. You feel the day's tension ebb from your shoulders, replaced by a calm awareness of the city's enduring rhythm. Each household, each family, each individual contributes to a larger, intricate pattern that persists despite political instability, military pressures, or economic strain. Life in Rome is sustained not only by law and power, but by countless ordinary actions, repeated every day, invisible yet vital. As you continue your slow walk, You notice that even the city's walls seem to exhale with you. The stones remember decades, centuries of footsteps, conversations, and laughter. You feel a quiet connection to those who moved these streets before you and those who will move them after. The city lives in its rhythm, and you, like everyone else, are part of the current. The following morning, you wake to a city bathed in golden light, streets slowly humming as life begins again. Today, your attention drifts to education and learning, not in some formal academy, but as it manifests in daily Roman life. Knowledge isn't confined to scrolls or scholars. It moves through conversation, apprenticeship, storytelling, and observation. You notice it everywhere, in a cobbler teaching a boy to measure leather, in a baker explaining the subtle signs of perfectly fermented dough, in a senator rehearsing rhetoric aloud in his atrium. A mainstream historical fact settles softly. Formal education is limited, but literacy and practical learning are highly valued among citizens, particularly in the upper classes. Even tradespeople acquire essential knowledge through apprenticeship and observation.
You walk past a small school where a teacher or magister recites Latin and Greek to eager boys, their voices rising and falling in unison. The lessons are structured, rigorous, and occasionally harsh. Discipline is maintained through repetition and expectation. Quirky tidbit time. Students sometimes practiced writing with wax tablets, so mistakes could be erased. Ancient Roman drafts, essentially. Though the wax could be accidentally smudged, leaving embarrassing marks.
You smile, imagining frustrated boys rubbing furiously to erase their errors, just as you would in any time or place. Education for girls is subtler. Many learn at home, guided by mothers or older female relatives, focusing on household management, basic reading, and social graces. Historians still argue whether such informal learning offered women true intellectual agency or merely prepared them for domestic roles. Observing the city, you see how knowledge flows in unexpected directions. A woman quietly teaching her daughter about herbs, finances, or negotiation, effectively shaping the next generation. Outside, you notice the sounds of informal education everywhere. Artisans instruct apprentices on technique, correcting mistakes gently but firmly. Merchants explain trade nuances. Soldiers practice formations or recount past campaigns, implicitly teaching strategy and memory skills. Knowledge is as much about experience and observation as it is about formal instruction. You pause, recognizing that learning permeates the city, embedded in routine, repetition, and careful attention. Storytelling forms another vital vein of learning. Street performers, older citizens, and wandering philosophers all contribute narratives, history, myth, moral lessons, or humor that circulate widely. You stop briefly to listen as a storyteller recounts tales of past battles, not with the drama of epic poetry, but with precise, measured attention to detail. A light joke flits through your mind. The stories never quite match the official records, but they are far more entertaining. Storytelling functions both as entertainment and social glue, transmitting cultural values, cautionary lessons, and civic memory.
As you continue walking, you pass a small library, a rare, quiet space filled with scrolls, some copied by hand, some collected from afar. Patrons read quietly, occasionally discussing texts in hushed tones. You notice a man comparing Greek philosophical works with Roman histories, tracing parallels, noting divergences. Education here is intensely self-directed, reliant on curiosity and personal discipline.
Quirky tidbit. Some Romans practiced memory exercises called method of loci, imagining scrolls or concepts in physical spaces to remember them better, a precursor to modern mnemonic tricks. You imagine yourself trying it on the crowded forum streets and chuckle softly. You wander toward a courtyard where boys and girls practice basic rhetoric with tutors. Gestures are exaggerated, voices clear, and emphasis carefully placed.
Public speaking is considered essential for political and social advancement. Even those not intending to seek office learn the fundamentals, since persuasion and clarity carry weight in courts, marketplaces, and households alike. Historians still debate how effectively rhetorical training shaped actual behavior versus theoretical skill.
Watching, you suspect both outcomes coexist. In quieter corners, artisans demonstrate technique with patience and care. A potter shows precise hand movements, adjusting pressure subtly as clay spins on a wheel. The apprentice imitates carefully, mistakes corrected with gentle guidance. Observation, repetition, and subtle correction are the unspoken curriculum. Each skill is transmitted through touch, timing, and example rather than formal instruction alone. You marvel at how skillful eyes and hands convey lessons that words alone cannot. Evening brings quieter, more reflective study. Lamps flicker in small homes as children and adults read, write, or recount what they learned during the day. Parents and mentors act as guides, correcting mistakes and offering stories for both amusement and instruction. The city feels alive, not only with commerce and politics, but with the steady, quiet hum of learning, shaping minds, habits, and social order in subtle but enduring ways. As night deepens, you consider the cumulative effect of these everyday lessons. They shape citizens, artisans, soldiers, and leaders alike, transmitting practical skill, cultural knowledge, and civic expectation. Rome persists not only through armies and legislation, but through these quiet, persistent threads of instruction that weave the fabric of daily life.
In this way, education sustains the Republic as much as any speech or law, embedding wisdom into ordinary routines and interactions that keep the city functioning, alive, and attentive.
The afternoon sun is gentle now, casting long, golden shadows over the city, and you feel a subtle urge to wander, letting the city guide your steps. Today, your attention drifts toward leisure and public entertainment, not grand spectacles like gladiatorial games or massive triumphs, though those exist, but the quieter forms of diversion that fill the spaces between work, politics, and ritual. Life in Rome is punctuated by these moments, small pauses that allow citizens to breathe, socialize, and reset. You make your way to a small theater tucked near a busy street. Its stone benches rise gradually, capturing the voices of performers while giving the audience a good view of the stage. A play is underway, likely a comedy by Plautus or Terence, its humor rooted in everyday life, misunderstandings, and exaggerated characters. Laughter ripples through the crowd. Quirky tidbit time. Romans sometimes threw tomatoes or eggs at particularly terrible performances, turning even failure into interactive entertainment. You chuckle, imagining the chaos if someone actually did this today, though in the late Republic, such participatory critique seems oddly democratic. Watching the performance, you notice how the audience responds as a single organism. Citizens of all statuses share in the laughter, the gasps, and the sighs, momentarily leveling social hierarchy. Senators sit near merchants, freedmen near slaves, children leaning eagerly forward. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Theater and public performances function as both entertainment and social commentary, reflecting daily life, political issues, and cultural norms. For a moment, the Republic feels lighter, less burdened by ambition, debt, and rumor. After the theater, you drift to a nearby garden space where musicians play softly on lyres and flutes. The music is measured, gentle, not meant to dominate conversation, but to accompany it. People stroll along pathways, exchanging greetings, discussing minor business, or simply enjoying the ephemeral pleasure of sound, scent, and light. Historians still argue whether such spaces were truly public or functioned more as elite preserves disguised as communal areas, but walking among them, the distinction feels unimportant. The city breathes in these places, and you breathe with it.
You notice children playing quietly, their games echoing adult rituals in miniature. Boys mimic debates, while girls enact household negotiations, rehearsing future roles through play. Adults smile, sometimes offering gentle corrections, other times observing with a sense of detached amusement. Leisure here is educational, social, and restorative all at once. Quirky tidbit: some games involved counting, strategy, or rudimentary tactics, almost like informal schooling disguised as fun. You watch a small group playing Ludus Latrincolorum, a strategic board game, appreciating the continuity of thought, focus, and patience it requires.
Street performers wander through nearby plazas as well. Jugglers, acrobats, poets, and storytellers, each offering a small piece of entertainment in exchange for coins or applause. Their presence adds vitality to the cityscape, reminding citizens that culture is both portable and public. A light joke drifts through your mind. Rome's finest senators might debate endlessly, but a good juggler keeps everyone equally in thralls. Entertainment operates on a subtle, leveling principle.
Later, you pass a small temple where a festival of minor gods is underway, music and incense mingling with the playful sounds of nearby games. Ritual and leisure often overlap. Dancing, feasting, and performances intertwine with religious observance. This dual purpose highlights the Roman approach to life. Sacred and secular rarely exist in isolation. Another mainstream fact hums gently. Public festivals combine worship, social cohesion, and entertainment, reinforcing hierarchy while allowing ordinary citizens to participate in collective joy. As evening approaches, you wander toward the baths again, noticing familiar faces engaged in mild competitions, races, wrestling, even storytelling contests within the steam-filled halls. Physical exertion and amusement blend seamlessly. Bathing, sports, and games all function as restorative activities, helping people maintain both body and social networks. Historians still argue how much leisure in Rome is purely for enjoyment versus an instrument of social control. But from your vantage point, it feels natural and necessary.
The day winds down with people returning home or to quieter corners of the city. Laughter fades, music softens, and the air carries a slight coolness that hints at nightfall. You pause on a bridge, looking over the Tiber as light reflects on the water's surface, rippling gently. Rome feels alive, yet intimate in this moment. The pulse of politics, commerce, religion, and labor continues beneath the surface. But here, in leisure, the city allows itself, and you, a pause, a chance to savor existence without urgency or demand. You continue walking slowly, observing interactions that range from whispered conversations to boisterous games. Every activity is layered, teaching subtly, connecting citizens, and reinforcing a rhythm that keeps the Republic functioning. Life here is not merely about survival or ambition. It is about human presence, engagement, and the quiet satisfaction of participating in a society that, for all its faults, is remarkably complex and resilient. Night deepens over the city, and you feel the pull of home more strongly than any obligation outside. The streets, once lively with merchants, children, and performers, now carry only the occasional footstep or distant murmur. The city exhales softly, a slow, rhythmic pulse beneath the stars. You move carefully, savoring the calm, noting the subtle shift in air and light. Shadows stretch long across stone, and the scent of cooled earth mingles with the faint smoke of evening fires. It's in these hours that the Republic feels intimate, not vast. Your senses alert but relaxed, aware of every subtle detail, yet allowed the quiet luxury of observation rather than participation. Inside your dwelling, familiar routines unfold. You stoke the last embers of the hearth, filling the room with gentle warmth. Household sounds, wood shifting, a distant creak in a doorway, the soft breathing of those around you, combine into a quiet symphony that marks the end of another day. Slaves move discreetly, attending to tasks large and small, sweeping, replenishing lamps, arranging bedding. Their presence is efficient and unobtrusive, a silent foundation for your comfort. A mainstream historical fact settles into your mind. The domestic labor of enslaved people is essential to urban life, enabling ordinary citizens to function within the Republic's complex social web. You linger by a small shrine, offering a token of thanks to household gods. The ritual is brief but precise, habitual and comforting. Quirky tidbit time. Some Romans whispered secrets to the lares and penates, small personal petitions or confessions that never required public acknowledgement. You murmur your own private hopes into the dim light, smiling faintly at the thought that divine attention might be selective, or perhaps just amused. Historians still debate how seriously Romans took such domestic rituals versus performing them out of habit or social expectation. But tonight, it feels deeply personal and soothing.
With your tasks complete, you settle near the hearth, letting your body relax fully. Thoughts drift back over the day. The bustling markets, the strategic games, the laughter of children, the quiet authority of women in households, the rhythm of trade and labor, the pulse of military preparation, and the subtle omnipresence of religion. Each element threads together into a tapestry of ordinary life, complex and sustaining. You marvel at how so much of Rome's endurance depends not on grand speeches or triumphant parades, but on these quiet, repeated actions that often go unnoticed in formal histories.
Outside, the city is silent but alive. Lanterns flicker in distant windows. A dog barks once. A breeze stirs the leaves of a small courtyard tree. You inhale slowly, letting the city's stillness and continuity anchor your thoughts. Life in Rome is neither perfect nor predictable, but it persists, carried by countless hands, decisions, and small rituals that together form a resilient rhythm. You reflect on the nature of your days in this city. Power, ambition, and conflict swirl just beneath the surface, yet they are balanced by cooperation, habit, and subtle social intelligence. Women manage households with authority, children learn roles and expectations through play, and slaves maintain the vital systems of daily life. Soldiers and merchants participate in networks of duty, trade, and obligation. Even entertainment, education, and ritual serve as both delight and instruction. Historians still argue whether these structures were enough to preserve the Republic in the long term, but for now, they create a steady, living world you can navigate and understand. The night deepens further. You feel the weight of your body relaxing, muscles loosening from the day's movement and thought. Your eyelids grow heavy. The warm glow of the hearth softens as it fades to embers. Outside, distant lanterns shimmer like faint stars reflected in the quiet streets. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the city breathing as one organism, its rhythm synchronous yet complex, gentle yet persistent. Each element, labor, leisure, ritual, observation, contributes to the larger pulse that carries the Republic forward. Quietly, day by day, you shift slightly, letting the soft sheets and the warmth cradle your body. Breath slows, heartbeat softens. The distant murmur of the city blends with the memory of your day, the tactile details, and the quiet threads of human connection. Rome, vast and fragile, continues without you needing to intervene. The Republic's machinery hums in rhythm with your own, and you feel the satisfaction of being part of something larger yet intimate, a small yet vital node in a web of continuity and life. Finally, you sink fully into stillness. The night carries you gently, the city's rhythm fading into a backdrop for your dreams. Thoughts of markets, baths, soldiers, children, and gods dissolve slowly into a calm, peaceful awareness. Life continues outside, unhurried, uninterrupted, steady. You exhale fully, letting the quiet of Rome and the comfort of routine guide you toward deep, untroubled sleep. Now, as you lie still, the city's heartbeat softens to a gentle whisper. Let your thoughts drift over the day's textures, the warmth of the bath, the sound of children laughing, the faint scent of incense and bread, the rhythm of footsteps on stone streets. There's no need to chase every detail or resolve every concern. The Republic, like the city itself, will continue, carried by countless small actions, unnoticed but vital. You are part of that pulse, breathing with it, moving with it, and for tonight, you are enough simply by being present.
Feel your body sink further into rest. Each exhale releases tension. Muscles loosen, thoughts soften, and the senses relax. Imagine the flickering lamps outside your window dimming one by one, the distant voices fading into quiet, and the night air wrapping around you like a gentle cloak. The city hums softly beneath the stars, and in this soundless rhythm, you find reassurance.
Allow your mind to float over the layers of the day without grasping. Remember the small joys, food shared, stories told, skills learned, laughter, and quiet companionship. Let them linger like gentle echoes, not demanding attention, only offering calm. Your eyes grow heavier. The hearth's warmth settles in your chest. Breath by breath, the world softens. You are safe. You are part of something enduring. Let the subtle, constant pulse of life in Rome carry you into sleep, slow and steady, gentle and endless. Tomorrow the city will wake again, and you will rise with it. Tonight, however, is for rest, for calm, for letting the Republic's quiet rhythm lull you into untroubled dreams.
End of script. Sweet dreams.